Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for part 2 of our story tonight. And what a fabulous story this is, because we're learning about a family that has the usual problems that families often have, but things aren't going to end too well tonight for poor Walter. So let's continue with our story, but before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with our story. Once the kitchen was immaculate, Walter decided to ferret around in his wife's desk in her study to find that damned electric bill that was responsible for their blackout. He'd get things rolling by getting it paid first thing in the morning, he thought. He secretly suspected his son Austin was absolutely right, and while his wife Sammy did run an efficient ship with her household duties, when it came to paying the bills, she was pretty useless. But after they'd got married, she had insisted on taking responsibility for them, and Walter had reluctantly agreed to this. But he knew that this was not the first time his wife Sammy had messed up when it came to paying the bills.
"Walter, what on earth are you doing in here, going through my desk like that? That is my desk, and that is my paperwork, and I would appreciate it if you didn't meddle through my stuff like this."
She had entered her office only to observe her husband Walter rifling through the walnut desk, from where all her bills were paid, and where all her meal plans for the week ahead strategically laid out. Samantha's wide eyes revealed the level of her extreme disquiet that she felt having Walter ferreting through all the jumbled chaos of her stuff. It was both humiliating and embarrassing. No one likes it when somebody busybodies into their private affairs like this, especially when they're so messy, and Samantha was no exception to this rule. Walter, who was by nature a very kind, generous man, looked up at his wife Sammy reassuringly and gave her a sheepish grin.
"I'm sorry, I don't mean to interfere, but I'm looking for that electric bill, aren't I? But this desk is a sight for sore eyes, love. I'm not being rude, but in all honesty, I'm absolutely flabbergasted that you managed to find anything in this chaotic upheaval,"
he said, lifting up a thick pile of papers to demonstrate his point, along with some unopened brown envelopes. Sammy flushed as pink as a peony. This was more than a little embarrassing for her.
"It looks like you haven't opened half of these envelopes, love. Some of them are very definitely bills that need paying. Is there something you're not telling me? Are you behind paying some of these bills?"
"Of course I'm not behind paying the bills, Walter. I don't know what you're implying. I just overlooked the electric bill, but I've been very much prompt with paying all the other bills on time. You know, it just gets rather boring reading through all that stuff. I mean, can you blame me? It's laboriously dull."
"Look, love, I'm not judging you. If things are getting on top of you, I can always pay the bills instead for the family. It's not a big deal for me. I work at a bank. I know about these things. But we can't get behind paying our bills, can we? We certainly don't want to end up getting bad credit records just because we forgot to pay a bill. I would hate that to happen to our family."
"Oh, goodness gracious me, Walter. I never thought about that, about bad credit records and stuff like that. I've been such a complete idiot, haven't I? I guess, if the truth be told, I've been putting off going through everything. I'm so sorry I've let you and the kids down. You saw how mad Austin was with me tonight. He couldn't even bear to look me straight in the eyes. I think he thinks I've got feathers for brains."
"Don't go demeaning yourself, love. You're not alone. Most people abhor paying bills, and I don't relish the matter very much either. But it needs to be done. It's one of the drudgerous routines of life that needs to be addressed, whether we like it or not."
The desk was an embarrassment, and Samantha inwardly winced, seeing her husband going through all the paperwork. It made her flush with shame. The desk was clogged with bank statements, receipts, letters from friends, old recipes, magazines and newspaper articles that she'd cut up. Was it any wonder that among the tsunami of papers the occasional bill would slip away from her focus, and she might actually forget to pay it as a consequence, especially when she abhorred the job in the very first place? She knew only too well how often she put things on the back burner to do another day. She was the world's best procrastinator when it comes to things that she loathed to do.
"Good God, love," said Walter in astonishment. "How have you managed to pay any of our bills with all this chaos? Look at this desk. It gets worse the more I look into it. It looks like a missile has imploded in here. And that's being kind. You do need to reorganize this entire desk. My guess is you'll find things that you've been looking for a very long time, old recipes and stuff like that. I don't mean to have a go at you, Sammy. I know what you do around this house for all of us is invaluable. But how can you work in such a mess? No wonder you overlooked paying the electric bill. Frankly, I'm rather surprised you managed to pay anything at all, with things in such a precarious state. And half these bills haven't even been opened by you." "Well, I'd been meaning to clean the desk out, but I just couldn't do it." "Well, it might be a good idea to do, love, because we don't want to get cut off again. Next time it'll be our Walter. Let's just say if you find paying the bills so incredibly overwhelming, I will be happy to do it for us. It really isn't any skin off my nose. I'm much more organized than you are. Working at the bank has made me very efficient and methodical."
"It's not your job, Walter. Why don't you go and relax and let me find that electric bill? There is some order to my mess, believe it or not. I'm sure I know where it can be located."
"I don't think there isn't any order in this mess, love. If you think there is, you're kidding yourself. You'll be lucky to find anything in here, let alone the electric bill."
As Sammy approached the desk to take over from Walter, he gently pushed her away. He was a sweet, considerate man who never lost his temper, but he knew that this desk looked like a minefield, and these bills needed sorting out. So with his powerful torch, he pretty much could see what he was doing, and he started to get on with things. He knew that this mess was partly his fault. They should have paid their bills a long time ago by standing order. Then none of these hiccups would have arisen.
"I'm helping you sort this mess out, love. There is no shame in admitting that sometimes we need help in things. I'm much more scrupulous than you are. I'll find that bill for us. I tell you what, why don't you make us a cup of tea on the gas hob, while I go through some of these bills for us? Go on, off with you," he said, waving his hand at Sammy. "I can do this on my own," he said, looking up at her, giving her a reassuring smile.
Sammy did not move, but reluctantly stood rather awkwardly in the doorway. She watched her husband sifting through the papers. She was hit with an ominous feeling of discomfort, as seeing her husband rifling through some of her personal stuff made her feel very uneasy. She was certain the letter from Timothy was well hidden, in its secret compartment in the walnut desk that her husband didn't know about. But knowing how close her husband could be to finding it, left her stomach lurching in horror.
"I wish you'd let me do this, Walter. I don't know how I could have forgotten to pay the bill."
Samantha apologized profusely again, with her face an expression of complete bewilderment. She shook her head disapprovingly.
"Why would they disconnect us like this, without any advance warning? It's autumn, for goodness sake. The weather is getting a lot colder. They can't do this to us, can they? It can't be legal to do this to people, can it, Walter? I mean, this is seriously unscrupulous of them, if you ask me. I should write a letter of complaint to the electric company. This is downright unfair. You don't just cut off people like this without any due warning, do you?"
Walter chuckled. He looked up at his wife with a twinkle in his steely grey eyes.
"I suppose it's a quick way for them to ensure that our outstanding bills are paid. People always need electricity, so being cut off means they will do their damnedest to pay their bills in time. Don't you worry, my sweet pea. It's very easy to overlook payment. It can happen to the best of us. I wish you wouldn't keep beating yourself up about this. Albright was absolutely right. It was great fun eating by candlelight tonight. It was romantic. And as for Austin, Don't take any notice of him. He's a belligerent teenager that is tirelessly complaining about one thing or another, and in his eyes his parents can never do anything right. They're always at fault. I preferred it when he put me on a pedestal when he was younger, but now he's grown up. It's like he's seeing all our imperfections and isn't afraid to point them out to us, is he?
You are telling me, said Samantha, rolling her eyes at the back of her head in exasperation. If you think our Austin is bad, there are some rather unruly teenagers in his year, I hasten to say. And Amanda Waitree, Ivan's mother, you know Ivan has always been Walter's very best friend. Well, she was informing me that Ivan has painted his bedroom pitch black. Can you believe that? And if that isn't bad enough, the young man has been creeping out of his bedroom at all hours of the night. Can you believe it? She says he keeps visiting the cemetery at the back of their home. She followed him one night, asked him what the hell he was doing. He told her he was speaking to the dead. I couldn't believe it when she told me that. She said he had a Ouija board with him. She reckons he's been watching all those ghostly documentaries on television and is fixated about the supernatural. He goes on about how he wants to see a real ghost. Her boy doesn't know what he's doing experimenting with the occult like that. These teenagers need to learn some valuable lessons. He's messing around with things he can't even understand. Thank God our Austin isn't into that kind of thing. But having said that, I worry about him, because he's hanging around with Ivan all the time like he did when he was a tiny boy. And that boy with his dark passions, well, they might rub off on Austin. Poor Amanda Waitree. She says that her boy's idiosyncratic behaviour is freaking her the hell out. She's now bolted the window in his bedroom shut, so he can't creep out during the night. She's also burnt the Ouija board, because playing with the occult is asking for trouble. She even took him to the local church to get her pastor to speak to him.
Teenagers, Hay said Walter. Who would have them? It's insane what they put us adults through. But don't you worry about Austin. Ivan may be his best friend, but I don't think he's ever expressed any interest in the occult, has he? The only thing our son is interested in is sports and that damn music that he listens to, that drives me absolutely nuts.
Well, I hope you're right, love. I am extremely worried about Austin. Even though he's 17, you mustn't forget he's an impressionable young man. Teenagers can influence each other. And you know he hangs around Ivan all the time. They do say that you become like the company you keep.
You know what, love? You worry your pretty head far too much about things that are unlikely to ever happen. So what if Austin is friends with Ivan? Teenagers experiment with things all the time, don't they? There's nothing we can do to stop them. We can't have eyes on them all the time. I'm sure that Ivan will grow out of this weird phase in his life that he's going through at the moment. He'll soon get bored with it, find some other interest to occupy himself with.
Well, I hope you're right, love, said Samantha. I'm afraid I don't feel as confident as you do about this.
You know what I was thinking, love. Changing the subject, of course. We should get a standing order with the electric company at once. Then this sort of thing would never happen, for the money will come out of our account every single month. It's what most people do nowadays. I guess we've been rather unwisely paying our bills the old-fashioned way, which is infinitely less reliable. We're behind the times. We need to catch up with the way things are done now, and then we wouldn't be embroiled in all this dreadful mess. I mean, I work at a bank, for God's sake. You'd think I'd have modernized myself a little. So I don't have any excuses. I should know better. This is partly my responsibility.
Well, it would be a good idea to get a standing order. It would make things a whole lot easier, admitted Sammy. It's an absolute nightmare having to pay those bills every month. It's driving me completely bonkers.
Well, there you go. It's a good thing this has happened. We'll get those standing orders organized in the morning. Now, how about that tea we've been talking about, love? Because it ain't going to boil itself, is it? Said Walter. I don't know about you, but I'm already parched. My throat is dry. While you make the tea, I'll find that elusive outstanding electric bill. It must be somewhere among all these papers. Oh, of course, I'll go and put the kettle on. What a great idea. Thank God we have a gas cooker, or we really would be in a pickle tonight. I can barely see my hand in front of my face, Walter. It is so formidably dark in here. I can't believe that you can actually see what you're doing, with just a torchlight for company. I still say it's unethical for the electrics company to switch us off like they did. I'm raving mad with them. You're right, said Walter. It's wrong to disconnect people like this without advance warning. Oh dear, he said, lifting up an envelope and showing it to his wife, his gaze now fixed on her questioningly. What is it? Asked Samantha, peering curiously at the envelope, with its bright red writing slashed over the front of the envelope that read in big capital letters, Final Demands. It's a final demand, love, for the electricity payment. By the looks of things, you haven't paid the electrics for quite some time, which is why they have abruptly cut us off. It seems like they've been giving us plenty of advanced warning in some of these notifications I see here. You haven't paid the bill for ages, love. Is it any wonder they've cut us off like this? Samantha ran her hands through her hair, gasping in astonishment. How the hell did I not see that coming? How didn't I see those notifications? I must have shoved them in the back of the desk, clean forgotten about them. To be fair, this final demand was unfortunately stuck behind another envelope, said Walter. But honestly, love, are you surprised that you overlooked this, considering the mess that your desk is in? I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this desk is deplorable. It's impossible to see the wood for the trees in here. Please don't go on about my shortcomings, Walter. I'm embarrassed enough as it is. I'm so aware of them. Austin is right, I'm dopey. Don't you think I feel bad enough about messing up like this? Don't worry, love. I'll help you throw out some of this stuff, said Walter, sifting through some old bills and tossing them into the wire paper basket. Look, you don't need this, nor do you need this, he said, rolling up random pieces of paper into balls and tossing them into the basket. Ah, that's already better, is it not? Please don't throw anything important to me out, especially not any recipes. I need those. I'll be back in a tick. I'm going to get the tea on. When Samantha returned to her office with 2 mugs of tea in her hand, she put one mug down on the desk for her husband Walter to enjoy. But her husband had stopped tidying up the desk. He appeared to be holding a letter up in his hands, and when Samantha saw what he was flapping up and down, and the beautiful curly black writing on the page, she wanted the ground to swallow her up whole. How had her husband got his hands on that letter from Timothy? She thought she had hidden the letter discreetly in its safe hiding place in the secret panel in the old walnut desk. But now the letter she knew that she should have burnt up a long time ago was in her husband's hands. This was an absolute nightmare. If Walter had read that letter, would their lives ever be the same again after this? She didn't think so. This was the line in the sand that should never have been crossed. Pretty shadows from the torchlight flickered around the room. Samantha began trembling uncomfortably, her eyes fixating on the letter that Walter was holding up in his hands. If only she could close her eyes and wish away this moment, or pop into a time machine and transport herself back just an hour earlier. Indeed, she was so seized with trepidation, she was surprised she hadn't spilled tea all over her husband's lap, and succeeded in burning him when she'd placed the mug on top of the desk. The fact that the tea had remained in the cup was, in fact, a miracle in itself. Walter's steely grey eyes had grown as cold as a marble slab, and they appeared to be drilling into hers questioningly, almost as if he knew exactly what she'd done, but wanted to hear her admit it to him. Was the cat really out of the bag now? It would seem so. Could she make any excuses that would remove the overwrought expression growing on Walter's face, that, like a burgeoning vine, was becoming increasingly more formidable? "What the hell is this?" he said very quietly. "Who is Timothy? Is what he's saying in the letter true? Please, God, Sammy, tell me it's not true. I don't want to believe this could be true. Please, Sammy, tell me what I'm reading is not true." "Please, Walter,
I can explain. It's not what you think. It was just, a once-off thing, for old time's sake, Nothing more or less. Timothy, I've known him all my life. You remember him. He was my first love. He was into antiquities. He spent a lot of time in Egypt. He still does, I believe. He travels all around the globe, investigating antiquities and, history, stuff like that.
You're talking about Timothy that's into Egyptology, ancient artifacts. He travels the world. This is the Timothy you're talking about. He's the one that wrote you this letter.
Samantha nodded. That's the Timothy I'm talking about. Yes, it's him.
You better explain what's going on here, Sammy. Because I'm not happy about what I've just read. So you better have a good excuse for this. I'm listening hard.
What Sammy said next sent an eruption of anger shooting through Walter's body, rather like an unexploded landmine that had been dormant for many years, but one little trigger on the pulse, and it is set blazingly alight. What his wife was telling him, no man should ever have to hear from the woman he loves, more than life itself. But Sammy's words cut indiscriminately, through bone, marrow, and sinew. They were brutal to hear, by any manner of means. The sound that came out of Walter Harris's mouth was almost a roar. For a man who was composed and kept his temper in check, that noise that he made that night was more like a strangled cry of a wild animal, in great distress, that had been ensnared in a trap, was crying out in pain because it was badly injured. She had never heard her husband cry out like this. It was the most awful sound she had ever heard.
Why would you do this to me, Sammy? Am I not enough for you? Are we not enough?
Of course you're enough, Walter. I told you, Timothy was just a friend.
A friend? You call him a friend? When he writes letters like this to you?
Walter got up and walked over to his wife. He shook her shoulders hard. He'd never ever laid a finger on Sammy before, but he was so mad that he found himself shaking her in frustration. But he wasn't actually physically hurting her, but his distress was making Samantha very upset.
Please don't, Walter. Let's talk about this, shall we?
Austin, Samantha's 17-year-old son, sat up in bed with a start. He had heard a strange, strangled cry coming from inside the house. It sounded like an animal in distress. Or was it a nightmare that he'd been having? He couldn't be certain. He perked up from his sleeping position to listen more attentively. He heard the sound again. It was one of the scariest sounds he had ever heard. But in his dazed, rather sleepy state, he scrambled out of bed as quickly as he could. He had sensed that something was up in the house. It was in darkness, of course, and he remembered this when he reached for the electric switch to switch it on. Damn, he thought. He'd have to navigate his way around the house, rather like a blind man. Austin had an overactive imagination on him at the very best of times, and with the dark music he listened to, he'd often envisaged nightmare scenarios being played out in real life, like murders and violent crimes. Whether Austin knew it or not, the music that he listened to every day was having an unhealthy, rather negative effect on his psyche. It didn't help, of course, that his best friend Ivan was heavily invested in the occult. Austin could not comprehend why Ivan was so fascinated in all things outer-worldly. Whether he knew it or not, his friend's dark obsession was impacting his life, not in a positive way. He instinctively picked up his baseball bat that was next to his wardrobe and clutched it tightly in his hands. He began to cautiously creep down the hallway. The strangled cries were coming from his mother's study. Was his mother in trouble or something? Was somebody trying to hurt her? A feeling of overwhelming dread overcame him. He knew his mother would often work in her study late into the night, long after everybody else had long since retired to bed. His mother suffered from a raging insomnia. He had no idea what his mother got up to when she stayed up so late. Sometimes she could be found working on her sewing machine or cooking late into the night. But he knew she had a penchant for cutting out recipes from magazines and sticking them into an old scrapbook of hers. It was so dark he could barely see his hand in front of his face. The grandfather clock in the hall had just struck 2 minutes past 12 o'clock. It was past midnight. Austin was certain his father had long since retired to bed, as he had work in the morning, but his mother was probably still up and about, struggling to get to sleep as usual. He felt bad for her, having laid into her so hard over dinner that evening, but it was her fault that they had had a power failure. Suddenly he stood very still and took in a deep breath, his whole body trembling with trepidation. He heard the strangled cry again, and then his mother's pleading voice saying, "Please don't! Please don't!" Austin immediately believed his mother was in imminent danger. She sounded desperately afraid. "Oh my God," he thought. "Should I go and get Dad, wake him up and tell her there's an intruder in our home attacking our mother?" There had been newspaper reports of a lone gunman holding up families in the area. He had tied them down with cable ties and threatened them with his Glock 9mm gun, and caused distress in his wake. Had the man targeted their household, he wondered. There was no time to lose. Tonight Austin was going to be a hero and bring down the predator the police had been looking for quite some time. That was when Austin saw his quintessential opportunity. There was the figure, towering over his mother and appearing to be shaking her. But it was so dark he could barely see what was going on, but he could feel the danger. His mother cried out again, "Please, don't be like this! Don't be like this!" Austin courageously, following his instincts, lunged towards the figure that had been shaking his mother, and with one mighty wallop, the baseball bat he was carrying went thundering down on the back of the man's head. The figure collapsed to the ground in a sorry heap, and he heard his mother screaming, "What the hell have you done, Austin? What have you done?" 20 years later, Albright's account. I stood there in my mother's kitchen, slicing a large, sweet, juicy beef tomato with a sharp blade. The sweet juices ran out of the tomato, spilling over the wooden chopping board. I lay the slices between 2 slices of buttered brown bread, sprinkling them with copious amounts of salt and black pepper. I knew I needed to eat. I had barely eaten a thing in days, but I felt nauseous, and it didn't help that a thunderous headache boomed in my head day and night. I needed to keep up my strength. I glanced out of the kitchen window. It was such a prepossessing day, really beautiful. The sunlight spilled generously through the window, and our cat Chesterfield was contentedly licking his chops on the window seat and basking joyfully in the sun. He looked the picture of perfect contentment, as if nothing phased him at all. I envied him for being so chilled, as I was feeling anything but. I continued to look out of the kitchen window. I could observe the woods that fringed the borders of our property, and found myself reminiscing about my early childhood, where I had spent an excessive amount of time playing in those woods with my little doll Candy Floss, where we would become entrenched in our make-believe world together. I would have tea parties for Candy Floss under the trees, because growing up my brother Austin, being so much older than me, meant there were times I would be very lonely and have to keep to myself. So I used to entertain myself over the long lonely hours to brighten up my little world. I was hoping that the tomato sandwich might revive my flailing appetite, as in the past I had always found a tomato sandwich irresistibly difficult to refuse. But even the sweet, tempting juices of the tomato failed to titillate my taste buds. It was difficult to be hungry in my circumstances when I was watching my mother losing her battle against breast cancer. I knew she had hours left to live, and for the last couple of days I had not heard a peep out of her, for she had slipped into a deep sleep from which she had barely stirred. Apart from the occasional mumble and a little tossing and turning here and there, of course. I noticed her breathing patterns had changed significantly over the last few hours, which the nurse assured me meant there was not long left until my mother Sammy finally breathed her very last. I had contacted my brother Austin, and he said he'd be here soon, but he was taking his time to get here, and I was extremely worried that by the time he arrived on the scene, my mother would have long since gone. He was flying to Tanasket, which is a rural town in Washington state, situated on the Okanagan River, not far from the Canadian border. It's about 3 hours north-west of Spokane and 4 hours northeast of Seattle. The town is situated in the mountains, and to get there you will find yourself travelling down a tumultuous tumble of mountain roads. I was born in Spokane and lived there until I was only 8 years old, but I only rarely remember life in this rural town, which invites a fabulous outdoor lifestyle, with fishing and hunting opportunities, if you are that way inclined. On many occasions I had the privilege to go fishing with my brother Austin here, and had successfully caught some pretty hefty-looking pike that had seriously impressed my Aunt Heidi when she was alive. My mother had moved into Heidi's house with her sister after my father Walter disappeared from our lives, never to be seen again. My mother and brother preferred not to talk about my father, and it would drive me mad, because my blistered memories of him were so vague and indistinct. The police had investigated my father's disappearance. His car was found on the Mexican border, lying abandoned, with a note in my father's handwriting saying,
"I'm sorry. Don't try and find me. It's better this way. Remember, I love you all very much."
The police believed my father had deliberately broken away from our lives, like a wild horse bolting free from the stable. It was believed my father chose to disappear because the responsibilities of his life had consumed him all too much, and his boringly tedious job at the bank that he loathed had been the final straw.
"I'm afraid, ma'am, it's more common than you know,"
the police officer had assured my mother Sammy.
"We have reason to believe your husband chose to disappear from your life, to begin a new life for himself. I very much doubt he was met with foul play. The note he left affirms he just does not want to be found. I guess we should respect his decision, as he is an adult after all, and entitled to make his own choices in life. Was your husband, ma'am, suffering from depression at the time?"
she was asked.
"Well, I know my husband wasn't desperately happy with his job. I did try to ask him about it, officer, on so many occasions, and he would shut me down. He would say it was as boring as watching paint dry. So I didn't bother to ask him much about it. But I didn't get the impression he was desperately happy with his job. So I guess maybe he was down, but I didn't see it. But even if he was like that, why would he leave us, officer, like this in the lurch? It makes absolutely no sense to me. Walter was an adoring, devoted family man who would have done almost anything for his family. So why would he leave us like this?"
The police officer had nodded his head, as if the very gesture affirmed that he expected as much.
"Well, there you go, ma'am. You almost answered your own question. You yourself were saying he wasn't desperately happy with his job at the bank. There is nothing worse in this life, ma'am, than doing a job you loathe. And for some people it can get all too much for them. I've seen it before, you know, and I'll see it again. One never knows, ma'am, the inner turmoil that some people go through, because they keep it all to themselves. I imagine your husband was rather reserved, a quiet, demure man."
"Exactly. He was like that. He didn't like to express his emotions very much. He was very introvert."
"Well, there you go again, ma'am. People have left their family for all kinds of reasons, I'm afraid. We've seen it in the force all the time. It's not that uncommon, you know. Don't blame yourself, ma'am, for any of this. Many people choose to disappear, and there really isn't a damn thing you can do about it. If they don't want to be found, then they won't be found. So leave them be. But you never know. One of these days, when your husband is settled, he might get in touch with you and the family."
I had no memory of my father. It saddened me to think that his life had been so hard for him, that he had chosen to leave us in the way he did. I do remember doing research on the matter, and discovered, to my shock, that even in Japan, people very often choose to abandon their old lives. And their family. They begin a new life, starting somewhere fresh. Had my father done the very same thing? Was he really that miserable living with us? I had missed my father growing up, only because, like all other kids, I knew I wanted to have a father figure in my life. My mother's sister Heidi had been 8 years her senior, and had passed away from breast cancer 5 years prior. She had actually worked for the sheriff's office for quite some time. Her mediocre house in the small rural town, to which we had grown extremely attached, had been left to my mother in Aunt Heidi's will. It would seem a long line of female family members had died of cancer. My mother's doctors had advised my mother to have a radical mastectomy after her sister's diagnosis, claiming my mother had the very same genetic gene that predisposed her to getting breast cancer. And she didn't listen to any well-meaning advice. My mother had simply refused to be mutilated, but her refusal to get a radical mastectomy as a preventative anti-cancer measure had now cost her her life. I was horrified to think that if she had had the radical surgery in the first place, there was a jolly good chance that she would still be fighting fit and very much alive. I was clandestinely rather mad at her for not taking the sound medical preventative measures that she had been advised to take by her oncologist. My mother just hated the idea of having her body pierced and prodded. I guess I understood where she was coming from on that. I was heartily relieved myself that I didn't carry this unfortunate gene, or I also would have been persuaded to have a radical mastectomy. It was devastating to see my mother deteriorate like this, at such a rapidly fast pace. The cancer that had laid claim to her life was one of the most aggressive forms of cancer the doctors had ever seen. My mother refused to go to a hospice. She opted instead to die in the comfort of her home. I entered my mother's bedroom rather reluctantly. It's funny, but when someone is dying, there's a sickly sweet smell that you pick up. You can feel the sickness almost overtake the entire room. It's exceedingly oppressive, almost as if it's closing in on you. I entered the room with a sandwich in my hand, which I knew I would never get to eat. I gestured to the nurse to take a break. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "It's not going to be very long now." "Please don't say that. My brother's not here yet," I said. "I hope he gets here in time. He's flying in from Nevada." "Well, let's hope that she'll hold on until then," said the nurse, "so that your brother has a chance to say his farewell to her. Sometimes they wait, you know, until everyone has said their piece, and then they go." "I hope you're right," I said. I wanted Austin to have an opportunity to say goodbye to Mum. He was so close to her. It will break his heart if he's not here when she passes away. Could my mother hold on for a little longer? I wasn't sure. So there we are. That is the end of part 2. Part 3 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.